When we think about Virgo, what exactly comes to mind? Because Virgo is the sixth sign. The sixth sign in the progression that starts in Aries and runs all the way to Virgo. Now, in my other podcasts, I've talked about how Aries to the sign of Cancer represents a foundational sort of processing within the psyche. Because within that context, the developing child and the developing mind is really not aware of a self. Even though they know that there's something and they can ask questions and they can think. But the sense of individuality, which is what was born at the ascendant point, it has not structured itself into a light yet. Okay? So the self is experienced as many different things. This is Aries to the sign of Cancer. Because in Leo, something emerges from this process. A being who appears to be able to shape the further development of its own reality. It means that it can alter its stories. And as a result of that, the being begins to investigate various alterations of stories. They get creative with it, they get playful with it. They change the narrative to see what it's like. And this is the ability to dramatize, because that's what creativity is in that sense. The ability to create scenarios, the ability to imagine different pathways for the thinking process, for the being process. And it is the cumulative of these types of behaviors, right, which we call the self-expressive nature of Leo. It expresses because it has to search for significance in the stories it's telling. It's looking for itself. Now, this does two things, because Leo imagines himself in different things that he creates, in different stories, where he's always playing a central role. Every time that story matches reality, there is a joy that emanates within Leo himself or herself. Okay? But Leo knows that the stories don't emanate as significance all the time. That's because they're other people. So it becomes an imperative for Leo to want to show up as significant in the realities of other people. And you know what Leo is? Leo is the sun. So imagine the sun expressing light and heat energy across all aspects of its surface. It's a very singular thing in the sense that if you are far away from the sun, you tend to perceive the sun as one potent source of heat energy or power. But obviously the sun is huge. There are different areas on the sun that are far away from other areas. But anyone who stands next to the sun far away enough, they won't be able to see these different things. They will just see the sun as one, and they will feel its power as one. That makes it very difficult for Leo to go into the environment of others, the reality system carried by others, because Leo is in his own universe. Okay? So it needs to penetrate into the universe of others in a way that helps it to achieve this significance that it's looking for, because now Leo knows that it's special. But do you know that Leo is special? You don't. So the process begins to demonstrate to you that it is special. And that's the narrative. And in order to do this, Leo must translate itself into something. It must imagine itself as something else. Because if it tries to go into another person's reality in such a unitary form, then there's no space for anybody else. The power of Leo will dominate the entire scene. And the individual will be perceived as off-putting, arrogant, bossy, domineering. Now, all it is really it's a change of perspective, basically, because that's really what it is. Because what is the difference in the arrogant person and the confident person? That's what we're going to hit on in this conversation, because there's something that differentiates the two. Because if you look at the arrogant person, he doesn't have anything really. But if you look at the confident person, there is that sense of significance. It has tangibility, all right? And that makes all the difference, because that's what Leo is trying to achieve. That's why the peak visible expression of Leo can be found in what? In Capricorn. That's where it wants to go and demonstrate that specialness. But what it really wants is Aquarius, because that's what sits opposite Leo. Because in Aquarius, it can be its more natural self. And I'll explain what that means, because it's the people that are giving Leo praise are very important to Leo. It likes praise whichever way it goes, but if people that have earned their place, just like it, are giving it praise, it values that much more than praise from everybody else. Because now it's a recognition by your own peer group. All right? Now, Leo begins this journey by attenuating its ego. And the way it does that, that is what Virgo is all about. Because you can imagine now that Virgo is the detailed structure that allows the sun to emit its light and radiation according to very specific pathways. Now, in the Leo perspective or the Leo point of view, these pathways, they were seen as one altogether, the power of the sun. But in Virgo, the emphasis now begins to become on the individual trajectories of light. That's really what it is. That way, you can build a solar panel in some sense. You can say, okay, from this exposure, this surface area of exposure, I can extract XYZ amount of energy. And you can calculate that based on the amount of light that is falling on that thing. So what it is a translation into a more detailed, but a more practical point of view. And that is how Leo must interpret its ability to enter the reality of other people. There has to be something to offer. And so Virgo is the process of converting that specialness that is in Leo. It translates itself into functional requirements. These functional requirements, they are all typified by things that you can offer to other people as a way of entering into their reality. So think of if you want to say hi to somebody, for instance. If you want to say hi to somebody and you're thinking of what to say or how to say, usually the everyday type of small talk is basically eventually comes down to, so who are you? What do you do? These questions, some of them are so important. They can make or break the posture itself, because the posture is Virgo, but the interactive process itself is Libra. It's a negotiation. It's the small talk, because you have managed to come into the reality of someone in a way that is not instantly rebuffed. And so a conversation gets going. If the conversation is good and both parties are interested, then you have dates. And then it begins the process of a love story. It's funny, right? That you encounter a love story and a story of intimacy in Scorpio just because you are going to Aquarius or Capricorn. What has this got to do with ambition? Well, it literally makes or breaks ambition. People know this. That's why, people say that relationships are very important in business, or relationships are very important in this or in that. But what relationships? Is it every relationship? Of course not. So which particular relationships are more important? Well, it depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve in your 10th house or in Capricorn, because that is what will determine the pathway. Because remember, the entire process is the translation of the unitary image of the sun, which is the gift that is delivered from the sign of Cancer. That unitary nature of the sun must now be brought into perspectives that allow the energy of the sun to be translated into functional requirements. Now, the sun is a generator, so it has the power to generate many, many, many functional requirements. There are many ways you can come across to people. Okay? But the ways that you select for depend on the stories you are telling yourself about what you are trying to become. That is where you are now and where you are going. And some people, it happens, you meet someone and you're not even centering yourself at all. It's all about making them feel comfortable, making them feel pleasurable, but there's no such thing really. There's a reason why you're doing it. Whatever reason that is really behind why you are doing that, it has to be able to connect to your 10th house or to Capricorn, because that's really where you want to go. That's what started the solar journey in the first place. You want to become recognized for the significance that you are. And it is Virgo that allows this first step to take place. You can see the importance of this first step, because if it fails at Virgo, then it's going to be difficult everywhere else. Because the individual doesn't have a clear sense of functional requirements in terms of what do you want from people? What can they get from you? And so those who have significant placements in Leo, they will be affected by this. This is literally a story of that type of development in Leo. That's why it's there. It's a search for significance. And so those planets in Leo, they are talking about the way that this search is taking place. What is being searched for. Okay? Because whatever it is that is being searched for in Leo, that is the thing that your life significance is built around. Because it's the thing that is pulling your focus. Remember, your focus is actually made up of an actual movement in your head. You are changing location in your brain as you think and imagine. So you pull a sense of focus together as an active thing Because when you sleep, that sense of focus, because it's like an active thing, it's like holding something. And then when you sleep, you leave it. And so it appears as if it dissolves. But when you wake up the next morning, you have to reconstruct the sense of self. And you do that because you organize your memories. You understand? And so in Virgo, we're talking about something like that. It's this organization that allows you to know precisely the relationship between your inner sense of reality and your outer sense of reality. And the natal chart is suggesting that it needs to be driven by purpose. The purpose is what is indicated in your 10th house configuration or in the sign of Capricorn. It's synthesis, so the story is always spread all over the natal chart. That's how it is. That's really what it is. Okay? Virgo is that, it's like a lattice structure. It has nodes, vertices, connections, edges. It's like a geometry. But what it really is a structure that sits within the psyche that is drawn into existence by the way the person is thinking about their future in terms of what they are trying to achieve. And irrespective of whether you think you have this or not, you do. You do it unconsciously. Everybody does. Because that's how we chase motives. And so Virgo is naturally ruled by Mercury in the sense that Mercury has this dual expression. Because Mercury, its normal expression is the gathering of memories, so to speak. It's just registering reality, making sense of reality. And you can think of it as filtering out reality, latching on to certain patterns in reality. So it's the way you think, is the thing that you think about and how you actually do the thinking. Because the thinking means that you are referencing and comparing the nature of many different intervals. Okay? An interval is like just a line or something. And you are comparing and contrasting trillions of them that you have stored, because that's how you store memory. You have stored all over your brain. And so the act of thinking is the act of finding these things and all that. That's what Gemini is. And then when the connections between these parts of the brain, when they begin to become more long range, you are now in the realm of Sagittarius, because now you're exploring. So you're using these intervals more creatively. And there's a reason why that is happening, because you must have the confidence to be able to do that. Okay. Apart from the fact that the dynamic itself is connected to Gemini, because that's what sits opposite. It's also part of the Leo story as it goes from Leo to Virgo to Libra to Scorpio before it becomes Sagittarius, because Sagittarius in itself is the post-orgasmic experience. It is generated by Scorpio. So in that case, Virgo is that very important translator. It literally translates what you are into what you're trying to be. But it doesn't do this as an active process in Libra. It does this as a posture. So it's the way that you are organized. It's the way that you are arranged in some sense. It is the routine surrounding your life. It's the way you conduct your day-to-day business and all that. Because it's the way that you position yourself. But all the placements are always geared towards the way that you hope to connect with others as you seek what you seek. So that's the thing that is in Virgo. When a functional light is in Virgo, it either helps this process move on along smoothly, or it creates a block. When you have Mercury in Virgo, then within this Virgoan experience I have just described, the individual is able to extract this ability to compare and contrast intervals. Trillions of intervals. So these are people who are good at understanding the structure of thinking, because the structure itself is the posture in Virgo. And then the Mercury itself is the way that the mind works. And when you put the two together, you find people who have a natural aptitude for geometry, for mathematics, for accounting. Do you understand? They have a better interpretation of space-time, the structure of space-time. Because that's the way that they experience themselves. They experience themselves as that posture. Now, this feeds into everything else in the natal chart. So it's a contributing factor. It doesn't really dominate the essence of the person, because the person can make dumb decisions in other areas. But it shows that when matters arising that correspond to Virgo, this person defaults to this type of behavior or this type of outlook. So you present somebody something like that, or some type of reality system, maybe some type of knowledge. The person wants to understand it in that way. And if you're going to explain something to that person, that is the best approach. Otherwise, they probably don't know what you're talking about. Because what the Mercury in Virgo is doing is that they are keyed into the actual way that the brain is sifting through information. Because you have to imagine what that information really is. It's like noise. You know, your sense organs are the way that you connect to reality. So they are busy streaming, if you want to call it information. There's really nothing like information. It's a bioelectric sense. All right. That's what the human is receiving and processing. So information are patterns, right? So obviously you can also have a perspective of information on this, but the body doesn't know what information is. Okay. So you're gathering all the information coming from all these sense organs, but you have to make meaning of it. Because what does it mean to see something? What does it mean to feel something? What does it mean to taste something? What does it mean to hear something? Okay? You have to understand what it means. Otherwise, what is the point? So Mercury in Virgo is the way in which the brain is filtering, categorizing, packaging, drawing reference. It's that analytical connection. Okay? Now, if that Mercury in Virgo is sitting in some fortunate way, or would I say, in some way, with things like a shade of Neptune, not the full glare of it, because then, the full shade of Uranus, or a shade of Neptune here and there, or if it has a further reinforcement, maybe it has this connection to Saturn, all right? And Saturn is in a sign that is not entirely antagonistic to what Virgo is talking about. And then it has this other shade to Neptune, right? What emerges is a mind that is not only analytical, but is able to become extremely subtle in the nature of analytics. These are minds that they are able to come up with formulas. Like this guy, Ramanujan, for instance, right? He was an Indian mathematician. And he used to come up with these amazing formulas. It's what got him noticed. And he used to say that it comes to him, there's a goddess that sends it to him in a dream. Well, that's the way he's interpreting it. But it's his consciousness. Because that analytic part of him is able to tap into that Neptune. What that simply means is that the analyticity itself broadcasts like Neptune. And so it travels all over the brain, linking up things that it has no normal business linking up to. A shade here, or a shade there, a slight color here, a slight color there, a slight sound from here, and then it constructs something like a hologram. When you look at it, it's a solution to something. And you imagine that this has just come out of you. Yeah, because it's a part of you. And so nature gives you the circumstances that either support that development of that thing, or it takes it in a different trajectory. Okay? So the Mercury in Virgo is a capacity. It can go in many places depending on what the Mercury is doing, how it is sitting, how it is connecting, and who it is talking to, where it is located. But the underlying core of the placement is that it has this ability to measure and contrast in a well-defined and ordered way so many things. And it applies it in its day-to-day life, because what it's really looking for is that because Mercury has come to Virgo, then it means that it is conditioning the way that Libra is going to be accessed. You cannot have a Mercury in Virgo that is as pure as possible. It will constrain the type of small talk or your attitude towards small talk. That is if you don't have placements in Libra, or you don't have placements in other places that change the narrative a bit. Okay? Because someone with Mercury in Virgo, they have a finely discriminative type of mind. Now, it depends if other experiences have allowed them to develop this, or even if it's still in its infancy in terms of its undeveloped stage, meaning they're not trained mathematicians, they're not trained accountants, they're not trained programmers, etc. Right? But they still have this sense of this way that they can think. Then they will express it in the people that they meet. It will condition the type of places that they're more willing to go to. So the person might not be good at an all wine tasting if they're purely a Mercury in Virgo. No other coloration anywhere else. No other distinction anywhere else, right? And that person may not feel very comfortable. They may sound very technical, even when having small talk. They probably always want to talk about their favorite subjects, because it's the Leo that knows that it has this capacity. That's the way it's translating itself once you have Mercury in Virgo. It feels that the best way to translate it is in that type of thinking, or that type of way that the mind works when you have Mercury in Virgo. And you can always connect this to the narratives in the 10th house or in the narratives in Capricorn, because that's where it's going. Because what happens in Libra, if this person can meet someone who resonates with that type of mental condition or mental awareness, then they'd have a ball. They'd be fond of each other. They'd have a lot of interesting things to revolve around. But what is really going on is that either of the party, they are discovering themselves in the other. That is the nature of interest. It is the nature of similarity or recognition. So you're recognizing important parts of yourself in another person and vice versa. That's the basis upon which Scorpio is built. Because Scorpio is not like every other type of connection in terms of sexually. There's casual sex. Scorpio is not casual sex. And you could sleep with 10 different people casually, and it won't really mean anything, because that's the way you define it. The connection is just not there. But there could be this one person that you sleep with, and then that's it. The hold on you will be so strong, and you wonder what is going on. Well, the person is resonating according to the way Scorpio sits within you. And the Scorpio is something you're always trying to understand, because understanding is the nature of intimacy. And so you go searching for it within another person. That's what that attraction really is. And it shows up as the need to get together with this person, and not in a casual way. And because of that, the significance is carried. Where do you think that significance is coming from? It's coming from Leo. So Scorpio's job is to receive that significance, because it's now going to translate it into Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the ingredient that you are going to work with in order to build that Capricorn. So the Capricorn, in its sense, in this sense, it represents a destination, something that is waiting there to be arrived at. So the placement in Capricorn, or the 10th house, is telling you of the condition when this thing arrives. And if there's no planet or no functional light in the 10th house or in Capricorn, then the sign on the cusp of the 10th house is telling you something also, because it expects you to find that 10th house condition in the sign. So wherever the ruler of that sign is, it is under that Capricornian journey. That's really what it is. That's how the human being sits and postures towards a reality. It's Virgo. And so those who have like Virgo rising, they posture in such a way that they're ready to open up different types of barriers. The barriers between people. They firmly believe that relationships are the keys to success. That's your typical Virgo rising. And so they spend a lifetime generating this service agreement, or what I do for you versus what you do for me. It's like an unspoken rule. And so they're drawn towards utility, things that can be useful for the conditions that sit in Capricorn or in the 10th house. If they have any other functional lights between Virgo and this 10th house condition, or between Virgo and Capricorn, it's the continuation of that narrative. That's how you read the natal chart. Okay, so for those of you who haven't experienced that before, you should. You'd be surprised at the perspective that emerges. All right. You would know whether the perspective is real or not, because, it's not something that is new. It's something that you're doing. You just need to recognize that you're doing it, or you just need to recognize that you're experiencing reality that way. The recognition is based on the fact that you already know. It's the power of synthesis. Okay. All I do is just try to find the right words to express it as it is. But the symbolism is very rich. It's one of the reasons why astrological concepts are difficult to narrow down, because the symbolism is rich, but there is a thread. It's not hocus pocus. There is a thread, and you need to be able to follow the thread if you're going to read synthesis, if you're going to read a natal chart via synthesis. So if you want to learn how to do this beyond the summary I'm providing here, then you can come join me. You can come join my classes. They're online, meaning they're lectures. You just need to stream them. And I have plans to update them now, because currently there are 6 lectures. And you can subscribe to them, or you can buy a lifetime access to them. When I say lifetime, conditions do apply, because obviously, if the internet no longer exists, then what do you know? So you can buy a lifetime access to this, and then you can stream the lectures. There are 6 of them. The first one is concerned with why astrology works, but it also includes the how. That needs updating too, because I need to make it even richer, and all my existing students are going to experience this for free. Even past students, people who have passed through the classes or the lectures themselves, they will get this update, because it's a much richer form of information. Okay? Because I want them to feel the reason why astrology works. Because remember what we're doing here. My business is not to increase astrology. I'm not looking to become the world's wealthiest astrologer. That's not my point. Astrology is just the only way I can speak to you. And what I'm trying to speak to you about is the 5 principles of organized complexity. Because that is the thing that is sitting at the root of all knowledge, all knowing in that sense, everything that a human being can access. Because there's nothing, it's just yourself. So when you're looking at the core of the 5 principles of organized complexity, you're looking at yourself. Okay? And it's only by understanding what this means that you can know who God is. All right. Right now, we tell ourselves all sorts of stories, all sorts of narratives, but it's a wind and a prayer, because we have no idea what is going on. And this is not a condition that is good for a human being. A human being is a far more capable creature than current behavior suggests. A human being is capable of much more in terms of knowledge. And you wonder, but all the science, all the advancements, all the digital connections, the internet, the World Wide Web, the Large Hadron Collider. We're talking about spacecrafts going past Pluto. How can you say we live in the most advanced age possible? But that's not true. It's absolutely not true. Because the most advanced age possible will be able to answer the most advanced question possible. And the most advanced question possible relates to you when you look at yourself in the mirror. You are more advanced than any potential iPhone, any potential space rocket, any potential technology that human beings are capable of building. You are far more advanced than it. And yet when you look at this advancement, you have no idea what you're looking at. Because you don't have the answer to the question. What is a human? It's not a speculative answer. It's not an answer that you spend years researching and then after 10 years a new idea comes and throws everything upside down. That's not the way that it works. It's an answer that is final. No update again. That's the way it sits. It's not really something that is brought. It's something that's always been there. You just become aware of it. And so astrologically, every human being is looking at the same thing, but they don't know what they're looking at. And that's the condition that everybody exists in. And we tell stories within this vacuum. And we think that we're very advanced. Advancement is not a technology. It's how you treat the most important thing that you know of. And the most important thing that you know of, that is the way it has been designed, that's the way it has been built, is another human being. And that is factually accurate. Quote me anywhere. That's what it is. That's what it will always be. And so if you don't recognize it, then it means that your reality system or your perception is askew. These are the types of things that cannot really be tolerated when your Mercury is in Virgo. Because your mind is used to searching for structure, pathways, as I like to call them, trajectories. And so your mind is really geared towards being able to navigate this interpersonal relationshiping thing to the structure sitting in a 10th house or in Capricorn. And if there's a structure in Aquarius, even better, because it tells you that that Leo arrives where it really wants to be, which is to be significant in the eyes of its peers. That's its ultimate celebration. You look at the very last degree of Aquarius, it is the loftiest of human ego. The loftiest as a material form, because beyond that, the ego becomes so lofty, it transcends beyond the physical requirements of nature. That's at that level you are telling the most beautiful stories possible. It's a capacity that a human being has. Alright? And I've just explained a little bit of how it emerges. Now, these beautiful stories, like I said yesterday, or in my other podcast, they're not fantasies. They're not nonsensical fantasies, because you are revealing the true nature of reality, and it's extremely beautiful. That's how it's built. The higher you go, the more beautiful it becomes. And so the human being, the need for transcendence, self-transcendence, is to lift off towards this infinite beauty. So it's a very grand thing. This is where Leo, it's why you come into this existence in the first place. You just burst into the scene because you're looking to replicate this. And I'm sure I have one or two podcasts where I've explained what it actually means and why you are looking to do this. Okay? So what I'm saying is that it all starts, well, depending on how you tell the story, it always starts somewhere. But in Virgo, the need of Leo to prove himself special within the reality of others, that's where it really begins. And when Mercury is in Virgo, Mercury becomes a tool in the achievement of that purpose. So that it will show up as the way that your mind filters information. Because all this sensory information is like white noise. Literally. It's like static. Your brain is sieving that information in a biochemical way. It is sieving it, and from that sieve, it is extracting recognizable patterns. And if the pattern becomes recognizable enough, it encodes it as the connection between brain cells or neurons. So that the thing that made it encode the connections, that becomes the memory of it. Do you understand? The interesting thing is how this biochemical process is happening in your brain. Remember, Virgo is the 6th sign. Do you know how this extraction of meaning by filtering this almost infinite amount of sensory information that is pouring through all your senses, that is giving you the impression that you know what is going on around you, it simply has no way of processing itself. That has always been the problem. To know what it is. It can process the other because Virgo goes into Libra. But what of the self? And most of the self, because the process actually starts shining in Leo, most of the self is dark because it's the sign of Cancer all the way to Aries. So it doesn't have access to the state of self or the sense of self it had as a growing child. And this worries it. All right, but that's a different discussion. In order to implement the extraction of meaning from this, what looks like white noise, meaning it's like pure random noise, your brain biochemically deploys 6 layers in your neocortex. Your neocortex is the top part of your cerebral cortex. It segments it into 6 layers. And to understand why, you have to understand the 5 principles of organized complexity. Because I've been talking about it for a very long time. This is something that is not a settled matter in neuroscience. How the brain extracts meaning. Because it's a very detailed process, but it is all built around this 6-layered architecture. And there's a reason for that. Okay? What you're looking at is the best possible design. And these are the things that interest someone with Mercury in Virgo. Because that Mercury is talking about these 6 layers. Because Virgo is the 6th sign. You think it's a coincidence? You think the people who actually understood these things, you think they had no ideas of these things that you see as if being discovered by modern science? Of course not. Because the explanations from the astrological field, you have to be able to translate them biochemically. Otherwise, what are you talking about? Is it hocus pocus? Is it magic? No, behavior is something that is generated. And you cannot generate behavior if you don't have the right circuitry, if you don't have the right connections. So what we're saying is that the way that these connections emerge, the way that you are formed in some sense, it is linked to the way that the solar system is referencing itself to the rest of the universe. And why is that such a strange thought? It's not. Why should it be? The real question is why you think it shouldn't. That's where the real question is. Why do you think that this should not be the case? After all, you can feel the gravity from the sun, right? You're standing on it, literally. It's called the Earth. It's there because of the gravity of the sun. You can feel the gravity of the rest of the universe around you. Otherwise, the solar system will not be stable. And stability is what you need if you're going to evolve something as expensive as a human. So I ask you again, why should it not be the case? Because I should be looking at everybody else and asking them, but why is astrological thinking so strange to you? Because as long as you think it's strange to you, you're living in a reality that is not real at all. It's completely fake because you don't know what is going on. You have no idea. And that's because you have no idea of self. You don't know who is behind the curtain. You don't even know, why there's a curtain there or whatever. So you go through life with all sorts of information, except the one that is missing. The one that you are really here to get, which is the one that tells you who you are or what you are. And you know it balls to bones, without doubt. Don't worry, when you see it, you will understand what I'm talking about. Because it's not something that is speculative. That's what the message of the 5 principles of organized complexity is really talking about. It's not speculative, it's something that is very fixed. And it has been fixed for a very long time. And people have known about it for a very long time. For one reason or the other, this generation, no. They're told something else. Alright? And when you have Mercury sitting in Virgo, one of the irritations you're going to have is that you will see the ways that things can be. A better way, a more efficient way, a more this, a more that. Invariably, that's what you will see because that's the way your mind works. And then these will now play central themes in your relationships. Because if you're someone who you have a habit of trying to correct things or trying to adjust them, well, people don't like to be corrected and people don't like to be adjusted. So being very critical, even hypercritical, is one of the features that emerges when Mercury is in Virgo. Because it's not that the person wants to be hypercritical. They're just responding to the way that their mind works. But they're focusing on something else. Expectations. And usually there's a pattern that accentuates that or reduces that in the natal chart. Because Mercury in Virgo is a potential. It needs to express itself. And that's what the natal chart is trying to tell us. How it is expressing itself as a person. Alright? And this is important now because this is the basis of behavior. Now, the general idea why I do these teachings and everything, what does any of it really mean? Or why does it really matter? Is because you have to understand the nature of goodness. And you have to be able to understand it decoupled from what you call a religion. Because that's not real. And so your understanding of goodness is also not real. That's why people don't give a shit about it. They think they do, but they don't. In order to be able to understand goodness as a functional thing, because that's what it is, you have to understand how it all fits together to bring about outcome. You have to understand how your subjective experience connects to the laws of physics and why they are the same thing. And you can now see the equivalence relationships that exist between the subjective experience that you're having and the confirmable experience of the real world. It's like science today, but like I say, science today is not really science. It has politics in it, and so it's not a pure expression of that aspect of human beings that want to know. And things like that are the things that infuriate a Mercury in Virgo. Because the way the person perceives themselves, how they are interpreting their sense of self-significance, Leo, they're interpreting it as something that is very beautiful. Structure. Things make sense. It's like an order, all right? And they're postured with this order because they want this posture to lead them to the pinnacle of their self-expression. And so depending on where you find yourself, you may find yourself in an environment that accentuates this way of being or suppresses it. And so it could be exciting mathematical work or it could be criticisms. It could even be both. But the idea is that there is a measure of something that is being acquired with Mercury in Virgo. When it begins to translate itself into the relationship potential that it carries, then it becomes very powerful. And that is usually indicated by what you have in the 7th house or in Libra, depending on how it sits. And then Libra will tell you how it is going into Scorpio. And when it gets into Scorpio, what you're really looking for is a surge in energy. Because it is the energy of Scorpio, the orgasmic experience, and the intimacy of it. That is what is going to drive Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is not something that can be driven once. Why? Because it's an expanding space. It's growing minute by minute, moment by moment. It is the capacity for knowing. It begins to accelerate. It demands acceleration. That's why the symbolism for Sagittarius is a centaur. It's half man, half horse. It is indicating that the speed, you need to be fast, you need to be bold, you need to be agile, you need to move. It's the speed of the mind as it connects individual concept centers into long range orders and patterns. But remember, there's really nothing. You are doing it to yourself. And so your mind is evolving into a state capable of accessing higher understanding and higher light. All right. Physically, if you don't have the connections where centers of learning are, then this thing, as it surges, as Sagittarius surges, it tends to move the person around so that you travel, you experience travel to other cultures and everything. But it's just your mind looking for a pathway in order to be able to expand, because it must expand into the conviction that the promise that is held in Capricorn can be achieved. And this is realized based on what is going on in Sagittarius. So that Sagittarius requires continuous input. That is why intimacy must be continuous. If it's the generator, then it must be continuous, because every time intimacy comes together, it creates Sagittarius, more of it. And the Sagittarian experience is one of an expanding mind, meaning that you're learning and you're knowing. It is a specific type of knowledge that allows you to single out the pathway or the trajectory that leads to the tangible actualization of ambition. So it's a consideration of so many things that you bring together to try to figure out exactly how the promise that is in Capricorn can emerge. It's you that will do the assessment. You will figure it out. The astrology is just describing how you are figuring it out. So that's Mercury in Virgo. If you want to have a synthesis, my details are always in the video description.